Last night, flames licking at the curb of an A road in Hampshire. What started as a vehicle fire found a waiting tinderbox in the nearby heathland of the New Forest. More than 20 drivers abandoned their cars, getting as far away as they could, while firefighters stayed overnight to tackle the blaze. 120 were still fighting it this afternoon, with teams drafted in from all over the country, including Devon, London and Sussex, here drawing water from a local fishing lake. This hose is 6 kilometres long, and every minute it pumps 1,500 litres of water up to the fire over there. It's now the size of about 140 football pitches, but it's tonight, when the ground is at its driest, that firefighters are most worried about it spreading. New Forest Park authorities say extreme weather is putting one of the most precious habitats in the UK at risk.
It's one of the most important areas in Western Europe for heathland in particular, and we have all 6 reptile species here in the UK on the New Forest. Birds like Dartford warbler, migrants like nightjars, plants like sundew. All of these are rare nationally and internationally. We have ancient woodlands that can't be replaced if they go up in flame. So from an international perspective, it's a really important place, the New Forest.
Other blazes have been burning around the country. 2 bungalows were destroyed by a fire which spread from a field in Diss in Norfolk. No serious injuries were reported. This is Holme Fen in Cambridgeshire, where firefighters have been working to control the flames for 3 days. And this area near Llanganada Reservoir in South Wales has been burning since Friday, with crews enlisting help from the sky to try to contain it. The smoke from the moorland could be smelt by people waking up in Bristol this morning. Record temperatures this summer have left the ground parched, cracked and broken, with water reserves at lows despite record periods of rain earlier this year.
But ultimately, the answer to this is another long-term fix. The answer is around infrastructure. It's around ensuring that we've got the water infrastructure, including reservoirs. Obviously, that's the top of everybody's list, but there's a huge amount more infrastructure that goes beyond that. I mean, look, I'm very lucky. I sit in the northeast of England, where we have a lot of water, actually. It's not because we've had a lot of rain. It's because we've got great reservoir capacity.
But reservoirs take time to build, and yet another heatwave is on the way, with temperatures this week expected to hit the mid-30s. Half of England and all of Wales was already in drought, and today that was revised up, with 71% of England now affected. The UK is starting to feel the hotter, drier summers climate scientists have long warned of, while the EU's weather service Copernicus confirmed June and July to be the hottest on record in Western Europe, hastening the spread of deadly wildfires. So far in August, low water levels have beached a ship in the Rhine in Germany and forced rice farmers in Italy to abandon some of their plots to conserve water for others. This, the fastest heating continent on Earth.
Amelia Jen reporting. Well, our correspondent Andy Davis is at Blagdon Lake in Somerset, which serves the Bristol water area. It's one of the top 3 lowest reservoirs in England, with exceptionally low levels of water. Well, let's go live to Andy. Andy, my gosh, that does look dry.
Yeah, Matt, this reservoir supplies billions of litres of water each year. If we'd come back here, if we'd been here in January, the water levels were full to overflowing, way above my head height. And what a different picture it is now, with long stretches of these banks exposed and the capacity dramatically down by, it's now just at 54% of what it can hold. Southwest Water has said the level's actually higher now than it was this time last year, and they insist they're well prepared. But it is, as you were saying, it's now one of 5 reservoirs classified by England's Environment Agency as being exceptionally low for this time of year. And across England, reservoir storage, so healthy after those winter rains, now stands at 69%. That's 11% lower than it would be for this time of year. And in July alone, it fell by what they're saying 16%. That's the greatest reduction in reservoir storage in July in at least 30 years. And the Environment Agency this evening said there are now over 27 million people affected by hosepipe bans.
So no surprise then, Andy, that they're calling for more reservoirs to be built.
Yes, and remember, you'll hear the National Farmers Union. They've been calling for more flexibility in water storage on farms, and the England's water minister tonight said they're stepping up support in that regard. But it is something to think that the last major reservoir built in the UK was in 1992. They are planning 9 new reservoirs by 2050, but they're hugely expensive, often hugely contentious, and 2050 is a long way off, especially when you consider that the latest prediction is that by 2055, England alone will need to find an additional 5 billion litres of water per day to meet rising demand.
Sobering thought. Andy, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Kieran in Leeds.
Well, amid this summer of heat waves and wildfires, no wonder there's renewed anxiety about the future of our planet. Anxieties that will only be fuelled further by a major report on the state of the climate across the globe in 2025. A year of record high temperatures, increasing greenhouse gas emissions and rising sea levels. The research from the American Meteorological Society paints a pretty bleak picture. Take the 3 main greenhouse gases that warm our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide all reached record high levels in 2025. Record and near record temperatures were also reached across the globe. Europe had its warmest year on record in 2025, with Russia, China and South Korea all experiencing their second warmest. In the North Pole, the Arctic had its second warmest year in 126 years of keeping records. Surface air temperatures in the Arctic are rising at around 3 times the global average rate. In the South Pole, Antarctica experienced the warmest temperatures since records began there, just under 50 years ago. And glaciers around the world are continuing to melt, losing ice for the 38th year in a row. And this comes as many governments around the world, not least Donald Trump's America, have slowed or reversed climate policies, even as the planet appears under ever greater strain. And the UK faces a similar decision around its climate policies, as Andy Burnham is being encouraged by some to row back on them, especially if, and that's a matter for debate, they can help with the cost of living. Well, very soon, his government will have to finally decide if it's going to approve, despite much vocal protest, drilling at Rosebank and Jackdaw, 2 massive unexplored oil and gas fields. Well, joining me now is Professor John Gluas, who's the Executive Director of the Durham Energy Institute and used to work in the oil and gas industry, and Professor of Energy and Climate Governance at Manchester University, Rebecca Willis, who used to advise the UK's Climate Change Committee. To you first, John. I mean, should the UK bluntly extract more of its own oil and gas?
It's a delightful question which only ever gets half answered. We are in a position where we are using oil and gas. Where we get it from, in part, determines just how damaging it is. Yes, the climate crisis is the most critical crisis that humanity's faced. But until we do a full analysis, a life cycle analysis, we may be doing worse by buying it elsewhere. We need to shift away from it very, very rapidly. But as to whether we develop our own or use someone else's is a question which has never been properly answered.
But I'm asking you that question. And would you approve these new oil and gas fields, which aren't new licences, they're existing licences, that's how they get around it in the Labour manifesto. But that's the question for the Prime Minister. Would you approve them?
I think I'd differentiate between the oil, which is we can buy on the open market anywhere, and gas. And the problem we've got with gas in the UK is that around about 30% of the gas we use is LNG, liquefied natural gas. That gets shipped from all over the world and is much worse than using our own if we have to.
Right. OK, so Professor Rebecca Willis, would you approve these oil and gas fields?
The UK can't approve any new oil or gas or coal sites and stay within its commitments stay within its responsibilities under the Paris Climate Accord. So it would be breaking international law. The reason for that is that this is a question of science and maths. If you look at how much greenhouse gases we can emit and stay below 2 degrees, which is that international threshold agreed by 198 countries, If you want to do that, there are strict limits to how much greenhouse gases you can emit. If we open new reserves, that blows us through.
The argument that always is made, though, isn't it, is that it's better, people who are in favour of doing this say, and John has sort of made that argument, it's better to produce our own gas in particular than import it.
There's enough oil and gas in reserves all over the world to more than bust through those climate limits. So the job isn't to have an argument about whether we should open new fields here. The obvious answer to that is no. The debate we need to have is how we make sure that we align our economic strategy with our climate commitments and make sure that we're supporting places like Aberdeen to transition and to benefit from those jobs in renewables and jobs that actually help the climate rather than taking us in the wrong direction.
Do we need gas, particularly UK domestically produced gas, John, do you think, in order even to sort of complete the renewables transition? Because we rely on gas, don't we, when wind and solar isn't producing?
We rely very heavily upon gas, both for power generation and for domestic purposes. Some 70% of households are heated with gas, a tiny bit with oil, a tiny bit with coal still. We could displace that quite easily using the same skills and the same know-how which exists in Aberdeen, and that's to drill for heat rather than for petroleum beneath our own feet. And it's something we've demonstrated. You know, the opportunity for geothermal energy in the UK could displace all of that gas and improve our energy security.
Well, and would you, Rebecca, just have a much more accelerated move towards renewables, towards more wind and solar and everything else?
Yeah, so the big opportunity now is to electrify. I agree there is a case for some geothermal, but also electrifying heat through heat pumps, for example, and obviously moving to electric vehicles. And the great thing about that is that it actually shelters us from gas crises. So the Climate Change Committee calculated that the cost of investing in that electrification and everything else we need to meet the net zero target is equivalent to one fossil fuel price shock. And that isn't taking into account the costs of climate change or even the added benefits like improved air quality, for example, if we move to electric vehicles. So it's an economic slam dunk, this argument. And it's frustrating that we keep getting back to, oh, but do we need gas?
We've just seen these really stark pictures on our screens this evening. How is it that the sort of the policy discussion seems to be about more oil and gas, whilst you look out the window and you can see for yourself what's going on?
Well, that's exactly the question that people are asking. So my research at Manchester, I spend time in rooms talking to ordinary people about climate and what they think government should be doing. And that's exactly the question they're asking. They're saying, we're worried about climate change. We want to, contribute to the solution. We're limited in what we can do as individuals. We rely on government to set those frameworks, to get the economy right in such a way that we can make sure that we get, jobs out of tackling climate change. That's what people want to see happening. And they're really frustrated that the discussion gets stuck in this kind of, net zero good or bad space.
Is there a country in the world that's gone full renewables, or at least a lot more renewables than us, John? Is there a model out there that we could follow?
Major developed economy. There's one country which is attributed to be carbon negative, and that's Bhutan. But the standard of living in Bhutan is very, very low. Norway has made huge strides towards sustainability, but it's based upon that legacy of money which has been in the funds there from producing oil and gas. It's tough, and it's tough because I could decarbonise the UK over the period of a few years using geothermal, but a barrel of hot water doesn't have the same energy density as a barrel of oil, and that's why it becomes very, very difficult to do. It's critical we do it. We're in the 6th extinction crisis in the last 500 million years or so, but it's tough. We shouldn't ignore that.
you advise leaders and governments, Professor Willis, but do you see support for net zero policy start to break down when they actually sort of engage with the reality of people's lives, like, for instance, banning sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030?
Yeah, so as I said, people are worried about climate change and they want government to act. That doesn't mean that they are going to support anything with a climate label on it. So the challenge for government is to set the framework. Part of that is just by talking about it, by saying, you know, this is a joint endeavour, a common challenge, and then by making sure that they put policies in place which mean that electric vehicles are cheaper. That's what they're doing with the electric vehicle mandate, for example, to make it easier and cheaper to fit heat pumps. And those are the things that, you know, my research shows would be really popular with people because they want to play their part. At the moment, people feel it's difficult and expensive, but that can change with the right policy.
Let me give an example to back up what Rebecca said. One of the things I've been involved with in the North East over the past decade is repurposing the old flooded coal mines to obtain low-grade heat. And Gateshead Council have had a scheme in full production, 6 megawatts since 2023, and they're able to undercut the gas prices in the area and still provide a stable environment. So it's addressing equity, it's addressing sustainability, and it's addressing security of energy.
We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. But Professor Rebecca Willis and Professor John Lewis, thank you very much.